I want you to put yourself in Copenhagen for a moment. Just, picture an idyllic, almost impossibly beautiful summer evening.
Oh, that Nordic twilight is really something else.
Right. It's August 10th, 2017. You are standing near the harbor, and the light is doing that very specific extended twilight thing where the sun seems to just like hover over the horizon.
Stretching these long golden shadows over the water.
Exactly. And right there, at the edge of the dock, a celebrated, internationally published freelance journalist is stepping aboard a submarine.
Which is a crazy image right from the start.
It really is. Now, when I say submarine, you probably picture a massive military vessel, right? Like dull gray, surrounded by naval officers.
Like out of a movie or something.
Yeah, put that entirely out of your mind. The vessel she is boarding is a 33-ton, amateur-built, crowdsourced submarine constructed by a local eccentric.
33 tons, just built by Guy.
Built by a guy. And she's there on assignment to interview him. So as the sub slips away from the dock, maneuvering out into the strait, she stands up in the conning tower, she's smiling. She waves goodbye to her friends and her boyfriend back on the shore.
And it's an image that really stays with you once you see it, because it is actually captured on camera by people standing nearby.
Yeah, just bystanders taking pictures.
Right.
Yep.
And the reason that image carries so much weight, the reason it's so haunting, is because that casual, happy wave goodbye from the top of that rusted metal tower, that's the last documented moment she has ever seen alive.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today we are opening up a massive stack of sources. We've got criminological reports, extremely dense forensic timelines, trial transcripts, and journalistic
A
retrospectives.
huge pile of material.
It is. We are looking at the murder of Kim Wall aboard the UC-3 Nautilus. And before we really get into the timeline, I want to establish our mission for this discussion.
Because it's easy to get sidetracked with a case like this.
Extremely easy. We are not going to use this time to litigate the broader systemic failures of the justice system or societal issues at large. Our focus today is strictly, entirely on the mechanics of the crime and the investigation.
Which is really where the details are the most staggering.
Yeah, we are going to unpack the forensic battle of wits that systematically dismantled a killer's shifting alibis. We're going to look closely at the psychological profiles of these two very different people.
Very, very different.
And we are going to walk through the intricate, undeniable physical and digital evidence that basically brought the truth up from the bottom of the ocean.
Which honestly is the right way to approach this specific material. From a purely investigative standpoint, this case is an absolute masterclass in modern forensics.
A masterclass.
Truly, you are going to see, over the course of this deep dive, how physical evidence, oceanography, pathology, and digital footprints can just entirely box a perpetrator into a corner.
You literally watch him run out of lies.
Exactly. You watch his individual forced to constantly rewrite his own narrative, inventing these increasingly elaborate physical impossibilities on the fly, until the cold, hard facts simply leave him with zero room to maneuver.
So to understand how all of this unfolded, we first have to understand the two people who stepped onto that submarine. We have to look at the trajectories of their lives and how wildly different they were before they collided.
Right, because they really were coming from two different worlds.
Let's start with Kim Isabel Frederica Wall. I want to spend some time here because in true crime, it is incredibly easy to reduce a person to just, the victim in someone else's dark story.
Yeah, just a footnote in the killer's Wikipedia page.
Exactly. And that is a massive disservice because Kim Wall was a force. She was a brilliant, relentlessly driven professional. The sources actually note that she was basically born with ink in her nostrils.
That is such a great phrase, because she really was. She was born in Trelleborg, Sweden, into a family where journalism wasn't just a profession, it was a way of life.
It was the family business.
Her mother, Ingrid, was a reporter. Her father, Joachim, was a veteran press photographer. So you can imagine the dinner table conversations were likely about deadlines, sources, narrative structure.
She grew up fluent in the language of reporting.
Absolutely. And she pursued it at the highest academic levels. I mean, she earned her bachelor's degree at the London School of Economics, which is no small feat.
Not at all.
And she followed that up by earning dual master's degrees in journalism and international affairs from Columbia University in New York.
So she has this incredible, elite academic pedigree. But what makes her career so fascinating isn't just the degrees, it's the specific journalistic beat she carved out for herself. She didn't want to sit in a press briefing room.
No. She hated standard news.
Right. She defined her work as covering what she called the undercurrents of rebellion.
The undercurrents of rebellion. It's such a perfect description of her work.
It tells you everything about how she viewed the world. When you read through the articles she published in her short career, the contrast in her subjects is just striking.
Yeah, she was everywhere.
She wasn't chasing political scandals. She spent time in Florida embedding herself with people who self-identify as real-life vampires.
Which is wild.
She traveled to Haiti, not just to cover the standard, post-earthquake tourism industry, but to cover traditional voodoo ceremonies and how they intersected with modern recovery.
She went out to the Libyan desert, too.
Yes. And she traveled to the Pacific to profile an eccentric Austro-German couple who retired to a remote island after a lifetime of launching rockets. She was essentially a sociological deep-sea diver.
It's a good analogy.
She was always looking beneath the surface of the standard news cycle, always looking for the humanity in the bizarre.
Exactly. She combined traditional, rigorous shoe leather reporting with a highly sophisticated foreign policy lens. She wasn't just writing human interest fluff. Her work was funded by major, serious organizations.
Like the Pulitzer Center.
Yeah, the Pulitzer Center and the International Women's Media Foundation. She was drawn to misfits. She wanted to amplify the voices of individuals who actively defied systemic norms.
And think about the empathy required to do that job well, To sit in a room with someone who believes they are a literal vampire or someone building rockets in a desert and to not judge them.
Right, to get them to actually trust you.
To actually get them to open up to you, you have to possess a profound outward-looking curiosity. You have to genuinely care about what makes other human beings tick.
Which is rare.
It's so rare, and it is that exact specific brand of empathy that brings her to the Copenhagen harbor on August 10th. She was actually at a massive transition point in her life.
She was literally packing her bags.
Yeah. She was packing up her apartment because she was about to move to Beijing, China with her boyfriend. They were starting a whole new chapter. She already had pitches lined up to write about Mao impersonators and the lingering social echoes of China's one-child policy.
She had her whole future mapped out.
But she had this one lingering local story she wanted to finish. A profile on a local guy who was building homemade rockets and submarines.
Yeah.
Peter Madsen.
And this is where the collision happens. Because if Kim Wall's life was defined by an outward-looking empathy and a desire to understand others, Peter Madsen's background was defined by an inward-looking obsession.
Complete obsession.
And what can only be described as an architecture of chaos. I mean, he was born in 1971, and the household he grew up in was highly volatile.
Very unstable.
His parents separated when he was 6 years old, and his mother left. Madsen stayed with his father, Carl. Now, Carl was over 30 years older than Madsen's mother.
Wow.
Yeah, a massive age gap. And when Madsen later described his father in interviews, he didn't use the words strict or traditional. He actually compared his own father to a concentration camp commander.
Okay, hold on. I want to pause on that for a second. Comparing the person who raised you to a concentration camp commander, that goes way beyond typical teenage rebellion, right?
Way beyond.
That implies a level of authoritarian cruelty and psychological control that is deeply, deeply disturbing.
It's incredibly disturbing, and it bred extreme isolation in Madsen. His father was incredibly rigid, but he also recognized his son's mechanical aptitude. So he encouraged Madsen's early obsessions with rocketry, chemistry, and ballooning.
Like, he built him a private workshop, right?
He did. He built him a workshop, but the trade-off was that by the time Madsen was 15, he was almost completely socially isolated.
Just a kid in a shed.
Exactly. He had no normal peer group. He lived entirely in the realm of his engineering fixations. And he wasn't just building model airplanes. At 15, he constructed and launched a 1-meter-tall model replica of the American ICBM MX Peacekeeper missile.
I read that in the sources, and it genuinely stopped me in my tracks.
It actually went up 100 meters before crashing.
An ICBM replica, a teenager building an intercontinental ballistic missile replica in his dad's shed, isn't just like a quirky hobby. That is a deeply intense militaristic level of fixation.
Yeah, it's not normal teenage stuff.
And you can see how this lack of socialization starts to manifest as he gets older. So he eventually joins the Dansk Amateur Rocket Club, the Danish Amateur Rocket Club. You would think, okay, finally, he's around people with similar interests. He's found his tribe.
You would think so, but no.
But his behavior was apparently so abrasive and so toxic that he alienated everyone. There is a quote from a former member in the source material that is just wild. It says, Saying his name would start the fire sprinkler system.
It is a brilliant, brilliant description of his
He
volatility.
was just that explosive.
He simply could not collaborate unless he was in absolute control of the project. Eventually, he drifts away from standard groups and integrates himself into the alternative industrial art scene on Refshalin.
Which is a very specific kind of place.
It's a fascinating place. It's a deserted shipyard peninsula in Copenhagen that had been taken over by these unconventional art collectives, groups like Half Machine and a floating art collective called Elutron.
Kind of like a Mad Max vibe.
Exactly, very industrial, celebrating the bizarre. And here, Madsen learned to blend his engineering with art, but he always did it with this highly performative, megalomaniacal edge.
It wasn't enough to just build something.
No, he wasn't just building things, he was demanding an audience. He once built a custom cannon, dragged it all the way to Copenhagen's City Hall Square, and fired it to destroy public possessions like MP3 players and mobile phones.
Just for the spectacle of it.
Just for the spectacle.
Yeah.
He wanted people to look at him.
It is all about asserting power and control over his environment and basically demanding that people watch him do it. And this culminates in his submarines.
Right, the submarines.
He builds 3 of them over the years. The Freya, the Kraka, and finally his masterpiece, the UC-3 Nautilus. He is throwing like submarine ballets in the harbor. He is constantly courting the press. He is completely starved for validation.
He needed to be seen as a genius.
So when you look at the evening of August 10th, you have these 2 completely opposite forces moving toward each other. You have Kim Wall, armed with this empathetic, outward-looking curiosity, trying to find the humanity in eccentric people. And you have Peter Madsen, armed with this narcissistic, inward-looking obsession, desperate for someone to document how brilliant he is.
And to understand the trap that was set that evening, we have to look very, very closely at the physical environment where that collision took place. We need to look at the UC-3 Nautilus itself.
Because it is basically the 3rd character in this story.
It is. Because this was not a standard commercial passenger vessel. It was a terrifying physical reality. The submarine was 17 meters long, which is about 56 feet, and weighed 33 tons.
Massive piece of machinery.
Massive. It was propelled by a diesel-electric system. And the specific mechanical layout of that engine is absolutely crucial to the forensic investigation that follows.
Right, because of how the submarine breathes. When I was reading the mechanical specs in the source material, I honestly had to read it twice. Let's break down the mechanics of that engine for the listener because it's vital to understanding what happens.
Okay, so to run a diesel engine, you need a massive, continuous supply of oxygen for combustion.
Diesel needs to breathe.
Exactly. In a standard military or commercial submarine, when you are submerged at periscope depth, you deploy a snorkel system. The snorkel reaches up above the surface of the water and pulls atmospheric air down directly into the engine intake.
Normal submarine stuff.
Right. But if the Nautilus was submerged and the snorkel was not deployed and that massive diesel engine was running,
Yeah.
it still desperately needs oxygen.
So where does it get it?
It has to ingest air from somewhere.
Right.
So due to its amateur design, it would literally suck the air directly from the internal crew cabin.
Okay, wait. So if you and I are sitting inside that submarine
Right.
and the hatches are closed and he fires up that diesel engine without the snorkel, the engine is literally competing with us for the oxygen in the room.
Not just competing. It is actively and violently vacuuming the air out of the sealed space you are sitting in.
That is terrifying.
The engine's demand for oxygen is so incredibly high that it causes a severe, immediate drop in internal atmosphere pressure. The sources state that within moments, the pressure drop inside that cabin would be equivalent to instantly standing at 3,000 meters above sea level.
Which is nearly 10,000 feet.
Right. It creates an incredible physical hazard. If the hatches are closed, the pressure differential makes them almost impossible to open from the inside.
So if you've ever been in a small, unventilated room, you know how quickly the air gets stale. Now imagine that room is a sealed steel tube surrounded by thousands of pounds of water pressure, and a mechanical monster is actively sucking the oxygen right out of your lungs.
It's a nightmare scenario.
It's like being locked in a steel bank vault where a giant industrial vacuum is suddenly activated. You are incredibly physically vulnerable in that space. It is the ultimate environmental trap.
The ultimate trap.
So let's trace the timeline of that fatal voyage. It's Thursday, August 10th. Madsen was actually scheduled to take his regular volunteer crew out on the sub. He had people lined up.
Oh, he cancels on them.
Abruptly, he texts them and just cancels the trip. Instead, he sends a last-minute text to Kim Wall.
Right. And she wasn't just sitting around waiting for him to call. She was at a waterfront farewell party with her boyfriend and their friends, celebrating their upcoming move to Beijing.
They were literally saying goodbye to their friends.
Yeah. She gets the text from Madsen saying essentially, if you want the interview, it's tonight, it's now or never. She decides it is too good of a journalistic opportunity to pass up.
She has that reporter's instinct.
She leaves the party, goes to the dock, and boards the submarine at approximately 1900 hours local time. 7 p.m., they're the only two people on board.
We have that image of her waving from the tower, and then the sub dives, and there is total radio silence. The Nautilus doesn't have a satellite tracking system, no GPS transponder pinging its location. It's just gone.
Off the grid completely.
As the evening goes on, her boyfriend is sending her texts, and they are not delivering. By the early hours of Friday, August 11th, the panic really sets in. He knows she should have been back hours ago.
Anyone would panic at that point.
He alerts the authorities, and this massive multi-agency search and rescue operation kicks off. You have helicopters in the air, ships sweeping the Arasan Strait and Koja Bay.
They're looking everywhere. The search continues all morning. Finally, at 10 a.m. on August 11th, a civilian spots the submarine afloat south of Copenhagen.
So they find it.
They find it. They make radio contact with Madsen. But then an hour later, at approximately 11 a.m., the situation suddenly deteriorates. The vessel rapidly founders.
Just starts sinking out of nowhere.
Exactly. It sinks in about 7 meters of water. Madsen emerges from the conning tower just as the water rushes in to flood the cabin, and he swims over to a nearby private rescue boat that had responded to the distress call.
And I want to focus on his demeanor when he gets pulled out of the water, because this is so telling. He gets onto this rescue boat, his multi-million-dollar life's work has just vanished beneath the waves, and his story is already perfectly formed.
He's not in shock.
Not at all. The rescuers ask him what happened. He claims he had a technical malfunction with a ballast tank valve, and it caused the sub to sink rapidly. And when they ask, "Where's the journalist?" he doesn't miss a beat.
He has an answer ready.
He claims a man overboard scenario. He says, "Oh, I dropped her off safely last night on an island near the Elutron art barge. I was alone when the sub sank."
He is incredibly calm, almost eerily calm. But this is the exact moment where the facade immediately begins to crack.
The very first crack.
When the rescue boat brings Madsen back to Dragar Harbor, the police are waiting to meet him. They're taking standard statements, treating him like a rescued captain. But as they are looking at him, the officers notice two very specific physical details.
Okay, what do they see?
First, he has fresh, unexplained scratches on his arms. Second, there's a small amount of dried blood on his left nostril.
It's unbelievable. He builds this elaborate 33-ton mechanical trap. He spins this whole calm story about valves and islands, and he walks off the boat with the victim's literal blood on his face.
He didn't even wash his face properly.
That dried blood on his nose is the thread. It is the single microscopic thread that, once the police start pulling, unravels his entire existence.
Because they don't ignore it.
No, the police take a swab, they run a rapid forensic test, and it proves that the blood on his nose and additional blood spatter later found on his protective bodysuit belongs to Kim Wall.
The journalist he supposedly dropped off safely.
Right, so he is immediately taken into custody and arrested on preliminary charges of negligent manslaughter.
And this arrest sets the stage for the forensic deconstruction of his alibis. What happens over the next few months is a grueling, scientific dismantling of a narcissist's lies.
It's amazing to watch the net close in.
You are watching a perpetrator get completely trapped by the laws of physics and biology. So let's start with alibi number 1. I dropped her off safely on an island, and the submarine sank due to a broken ballast valve.
Right, the mechanical failure story. So on Saturday, August 12th, just one day after the sinking, marine salvage teams bring in the heavy cranes.
They haul the whole thing up.
They raise the 33-ton Nautilus from the seabed. They pump the water out of the interior. The homicide chief, Jens Muller, personally oversees the inspection, and he confirms what they all feared. There is no body inside the submarine.
It's empty.
Empty. But as forensics teams begin swabbing the now empty steel walls, they find traces of dried blood pooling inside the cabin.
Now, the presence of that blood pooling is critical. It indicates that a severe, violent, and bleeding struggle took place inside that cabin long before the water entered the vessel to sink it.
Blood doesn't pool underwater.
Exactly. Yeah. But the police still have to address his claim about the mechanical failure, right? They have to close that loop. So they bring in forensic oceanographers and marine technicians to inspect the salvaged wreck.
The sub-experts.
Right. And these experts look at the valves, the ballast systems, and the intake pipes. They are able to definitively prove mechanically that the valves were manually opened from the inside.
Let's make sure the listener understands the implication of that, because a valve doesn't just unscrew itself.
No, it takes physical effort. The submarine did not suffer a spontaneous malfunction. It was deliberately and intentionally scuttled. Madsen purposefully opened the valves to sink his own submarine.
Why?
Because the ocean is the ultimate solvent. He was trying to wash away the biological evidence, the blood pooling of a massive crime scene.
So within 48 hours, Alibi 1 is completely obliterated by marine mechanics and blood evidence. He didn't drop her off, and the sub didn't break down.
He lied about all of it.
He murdered her, and he sank the sub to hide it. But because there's no body in the sub, the search grid shifts the bottom of the Baltic Sea. And this is where the story shifts from a mechanical mystery into something deeply, deeply gruesome.
It gets very dark from here.
On August 21st, 10 days after the sinking, a cyclist is just riding along a beach path on the southwest coast of Emiger Island, and they see something in the surf. They discover a human torso washed up on the shore.
The police secure the area, and DNA comparison quickly confirms that the torso belongs to Kim Wall.
Yeah.
And when the forensic pathologists perform the autopsy, the details they uncover are horrifying.
This was not an accident.
No, this was not the result of a propeller strike or a nautical accident. Her head, her arms, and her legs had been deliberately and methodically severed from the torso.
Methodically.
Furthermore, the torso exhibited 15 distinct stab wounds. 14 of those stab wounds were concentrated entirely in the groin and pelvic region, alongside additional stab wounds to the rib cage.
I want to pause on the pathology here because it's intense. When a medical examiner looks at a body in this state, they aren't just counting wounds, are they? They are reading the intent of the killer.
Absolutely. The forensics tell a story of cold, mechanical calculation. The pathologist determined that several of the punctures to the torso had been deliberately inflicted post-mortem, after she was dead.
Why do that?
This wasn't just a frenzy of rage during an attack. It was a calculated mechanical effort to vent decomposing body gases.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. When a human body begins to decompose, bacteria in the gut produce gases methane, hydrogen sulfide. These gases inflate the body, causing it to become buoyant and float to the surface.
Like a balloon.
Exactly. The killer knew this. He punctured the torso specifically to ensure those gases could escape, so the remains would stay hidden on the seabed. To ensure this, heavy metal pieces, like pipes, were secured to the torso using plastic cable ties to weigh it down.
Okay, so picture the interrogation room. The police sit across from Peter Madsen. They lay the cards on the table. They say, we have Kim's torso. We know she didn't get off the sub. We know she was stabbed, mutilated, and weighted down with metal pipes.
He's totally busted.
What does Madsen do? Does he confess? No. He completely abandons Alibi 1 without a second thought, and he invents Alibi 2.
Just pulls it out of thin air.
He says, okay. She didn't get off the sub. She died in a terrible accident on board. He claims he was holding open the submarine's massive metal hatch cover. He says it weighs 70 kilograms, about 155 pounds.
A heavy piece of steel.
He claims he lost his footing, the heavy hatch slipped from his grasp, slammed shut, and directly crushed Kim Wall's skull, killing her instantly.
And that's his news story.
He says he panicked, he was in shock, and he decided to give her a burial at sea by pulling her whole body out with a rope. He claims he never dismembered her.
It is a classic improvisational panic from a narcissist.
It really is. It's like watching a building collapse in slow motion, and he is frantically running around trying to patch the crumbling foundation with these increasingly absurd, structurally unsound lies.
Yes.
But here is the challenge for the police. He is claiming a 155-pound metal hatch crushed her skull. How do you definitively disprove a story about a crushed skull when you don't actually have the skull?
You have to find the skull.
Exact.
And to do that in the vastness of the Baltic Sea, the Danish police bring in a highly specialized tool from Sweden. Water search cadaver dogs.
Okay, I have to stop you there because when I read this in the notes, I was deeply confused. I understand a bloodhound tracking a scent through the woods. I understand a dog sniffing a suitcase at an airport. But how does a dog smell something under 30 feet of freezing seawater?
It sounds like magic, doesn't it?
Are they swimming? Are they leaning over the edge of the boat? How does the physics of that even work?
It's a great question, and it comes down to the physics of water and gas. The dogs are situated on the bow of police boats, actively sniffing the air currents just above the surface of the water.
So they stay dry.
They stay dry. When human remains decompose underwater, as we discussed, they release specific gases, putrescine, cadaverine. These gases dissolve into the water column and eventually form microscopic bubbles that rise to the surface.
Okay, I'm following.
When those bubbles hit the surface and break, they aerosolize. They release microscopic scent particles into the air. The dogs are highly trained to detect those specific aerosolized decomposition markers as they blow across the surface of the sea.
That is just staggering. They're literally smelling the microscopic chemistry of decomposition bubbling up through the ocean.
It is brilliant forensic work, and it yields results. On October 6th, relying on the concentrated hits from these Swedish cadaver dogs, police divers narrow their search grid and scour the bottom of Cook Bay.
And what do they find?
They recover 2 weighted plastic bags. Inside these bags, they find Kim Wall's head, her legs, her clothing, and a knife.
And this brings us to the ultimate aha moment for the medical examiners. They have her head, they take it straight back to the pathology lab, and they don't just look at it. They run a highly detailed 3-dimensional CT scan, and they perform a meticulous autopsy on the skull itself.
They're looking for the devastating trauma that a 155-pound steel hatch would inflict.
Right. And what the CT scan reveals is absolutely nothing.
Nothing at all.
There are 0 fractures. There is no blunt force trauma whatsoever. There is not even a hairline crack or deep tissue bruising to the skull. The complete, pristine physical integrity of her skull definitively, physically disproves Madsen's story.
The hatch didn't hit her.
The hatch did not hit her. Alibi 2 is dead in the water.
So once again, he is boxed in. The physical evidence marches right into the interrogation room and calls him a liar to his face.
So what is his next move?
He pivots to Alibi 3. On October 30th, he officially changes his story again. He says, okay, I admit it, I dismembered her body, but I swear I didn't kill her.
Oh, come on.
He now claims that she died from carbon monoxide poisoning inside the submarine while he was up on the deck. He says the engine malfunctioned, filled the cabin with exhaust, she was poisoned, and he only cut her up because he had to make the body smaller to get it out of the cramped hatch for his burial at sea.
He always has an excuse ready.
But once again, he underestimates the science. Toxicology and human physiology exposed the lie immediately. You see, the forensic pathologist had already meticulously examined the soft tissue of Kim Wall's lungs, which were recovered with the torso.
Right. And for the listener, let's explain how carbon monoxide actually kills you, because it leaves a very specific footprint, doesn't it?
It does. It leaves an undeniable chemical signature. Under normal circumstances, when you breathe, oxygen binds to the hemoglobin in your red blood cells, and your blood carries that oxygen to your organs.
Basic biology.
But carbon monoxide is highly toxic because it binds to hemoglobin roughly 200 times more aggressively than oxygen does. When you inhale carbon monoxide, it hijacks your blood cells, creating a compound called carboxyhemoglobin.
It essentially suffocates your organs from the inside out.
Exactly. But, crucially, it doesn't just vanish when you die. That carboxyhemoglobin remains trapped in the tissue.
So if she died the way he said she died, choking on diesel exhaust inside a sealed submarine, her lung tissue would be absolutely saturated with that chemical marker.
Completely saturated. But her autopsy showed 0 trace of carboxyhemoglobin. There was 0 carbon monoxide and 0 exhaust gas residue in the tissue of her lungs. Her lungs were completely clear of toxins.
It is physiologically impossible for his story to be true. If she died of exhaust inhalation, her cells would be screaming with the evidence. But there was nothing.
Alibi 3 is destroyed.
And just to close the loop on the physical recovery, police divers eventually found the handsaw he used in the bay on October 12th, and her arms were recovered in late November, completing the grim task of finding her remains.
So at this point, the physical environment, the ocean forensics, the CT scans, and the toxicology have completely disproved any claim of an accidental death.
He can't claim accident anymore.
But from a legal standpoint, proving someone lied about an accident isn't the same as proving premeditated murder. To secure a life sentence, investigators needed to prove the darkest element of this crime: premeditation.
They had to prove he planned to do this before she ever stepped on the boat.
Yes, and to find that, they had to stop looking at the bottom of the ocean and start looking inside his hard drives.
Which brings us to the digital footprint. And the timeline revealed by digital forensics is profoundly disturbing. The prosecution, led by Jacob Butchepson, started by simply cataloging the physical items Madsen brought onto the submarine that specific day.
Right, the tools.
He brought a handsaw, sharpened screwdrivers, plastic straps, and heavy metal pipes. None of these items were standard, required equipment for operating a submarine voyage. They were the tools of a premeditated crime.
But the real architectural blueprint for the murder was hidden in his devices.
Let's walk through that digital timeline, because when you look at his search history, you're looking directly into the architecture of his psychology, and it is dark.
It's awful. Digital forensics experts seized and analyzed his personal computer in his workshop, his external hard drives, and his iPhone. They found that starting in March 2017 and escalating steadily up through August, Madsen was regularly and obsessively searching for snuff films.
He was actively seeking them out.
He was actively seeking out videos of violent sexual torture and real-world execution videos featuring the decapitation of women.
And this wasn't just a passive passing curiosity months prior. It escalates right up to the very night before the murder.
It does. On August 9th, the night before he texts Kim Wall, his iPhone search history includes specific queries for the words beheading, girl, and agony.
Good Lord.
And the digital timestamps show that mere hours prior to the murder, he actively watched a video depicting a young woman in extreme pain as she was slowly decapitated with a small knife.
And then on August 10th, the actual day Kim Wall boards the sub, he is on his phone searching for the phrase off with her head. And incredibly, he searches how to erase all photos on your iPhone.
He's planning it all out.
He is actively planning the brutal act, and he is planning the digital cover-up simultaneously. But you know what truly breaks my brain about this?
What's that?
When reading through the forensic reports, the technicians noted that sitting right next to these horrific, sadistic searches for snuff films and beheadings were completely benign, everyday searches for things like cute kittens and bitcoins.
It is a terrifying cognitive dissonance.
It is the absolute banality of his cruelty. To be toggling between looking at cute kittens and looking at decapitation videos like it's just a normal Tuesday afternoon on the internet, it fundamentally breaks the social contract.
It really does.
It shows a mind that does not compartmentalize horror the way a healthy human brain does.
That exact dissonance is what the court-appointed psychiatrist keyed into during his pretrial evaluation. The clinical diagnoses presented to the court were severe.
What did they label him?
They described Madsen as highly intelligent, but they diagnosed him with extreme narcissistic psychopathy and a condition referred to as perverse polymorphism.
Okay, I want to stop there because perverse polymorphism sounds like a very dense, heavy clinical term. What does that actually look like in a person's day-to-day behavior? What does that mean for how they interact with the world?
It's an important distinction to make. In psychoanalytic and clinical terms, perverse polymorphism, or polymorphous perversity, refers to a state where an individual's sexual drives and aggressive impulses are not channeled into normative, concentrated behaviors.
So it's scattered.
Yes. Their sexual gratification is diffused across a wide spectrum of sadistic, voyeuristic, or atypical expressions. It means his capacity for arousal was fundamentally linked to inflicting pain, asserting total dominance, and engaging in boundary-breaking cruelty.
It's all tied to power.
Exactly. The evaluating pathologists and psychiatrists noted that he exhibited a total clinical lack of empathy. He showed absolutely no remorse or guilt during the evaluations.
None at all.
But what made him so dangerous was that he possessed a very high capacity for rage, which he successfully cloaked in this manipulative, eccentric charm.
He used his mad scientist persona as a shield. I found a quote from the trial testimony that perfectly illustrates his total lack of self-awareness regarding his own danger.
Oh, I think I know the one.
A female associate of Madsen's testified under oath that he once said to her casually, "I'm a psychopath, but a loving one."
Just tossed it out there.
It's like he thought his psychopathy was just a quirky personality trait, like being disorganized or being a picky eater, a quirk he could just manage with enough charm.
It speaks directly to his grandiose narcissism. He believed he was above the fundamental laws of human morality.
He really did.
So during the trial, which began in March 2018, the prosecution utilized biological evidence to concretely prove the motive behind the murder. Now, due to the torso being submerged in seawater for 10 days, they found no traces of Madsen's DNA on Wall's body parts.
The water washed it away.
Right. However, they did find traces of semen on the underclothing that was confiscated from Madsen immediately after his arrest at the harbor.
And his defense for that was completely ridiculous. He claimed he hadn't ejaculated in her presence, trying to dismiss it as entirely unrelated to the crime.
Right, like it was just a coincidence. But the prosecution didn't just present the semen in a vacuum. Prosecutor Christian Kirk combined this biological evidence with the forensic pathology, specifically the 14 distinct stab wounds inflicted precisely to her groin and pelvic region.
Building a complete picture.
They used this synthesis of evidence to establish beyond any reasonable doubt that this was not a mechanical accident, it was a highly sadistic, sexually motivated crime. The prosecutor stated in his closing arguments that Kim Wall had walked directly into a death trap.
And Madsen's behavior on the witness stand just cemented his sociopathy for the judges. When he was under cross-examination, the prosecutor asked him point blank, "Why did you dismember her body?"
And his response?
His response was chilling in its casualness. He looked at the court and said, "What do you do when you have a large problem? You make it smaller."
It is the answer of an engineer applying cold logic to a horrific human atrocity.
Total, absolute detachment.
The court even authorized investigations to see if he was connected to other unsolved dismemberment cases in Scandinavia, such as a 1986 cold case of a Japanese tourist found in Copenhagen Harbor, but they found no forensic links.
He was a first-time killer who went straight to the most extreme.
Ultimately, the evidence against him in the Kim Wall case was insurmountable. On April 25, 2018, the court convicted Peter Madsen of premeditated murder, aggravated sexual assault, and desecrating a corpse. He was sentenced to life in prison.
So in a normal story, this is where we fade to black. The trial is over. The killer is locked away in a cell. The public moves on. But Peter Madsen's narcissism doesn't just switch off because he's surrounded by concrete, does it?
Not at all.
His need for an audience, his need to control a narrative, continues straight into his incarceration. The circus just moves to a new venue.
It really does. He was sent to Herstedvester Prison, which is a facility that specializes in psychiatric care for long-term, severe offenders. But even within that highly regulated environment, he immediately began manipulating his surroundings.
Okay.
He maintained his open relationship lifestyle. He was constantly corresponding with female admirers on the outside. In 2019, he even managed to marry a Russian Mauritian opposition activist who visited him, though they later divorced.
He's getting married in prison.
He also cultivated a highly publicized romance with a young woman who first wrote to him when she was just a 17-year-old schoolgirl.
Which is deeply unsettling.
It sparked massive, widespread public outrage in Denmark. The idea that this violent, sadistic killer was allowed to exploit vulnerable women from inside his cell.
It is a dark psychological phenomenon, the people who write to convicted killers. But for Madsen, it was just another supply of narcissistic validation. And then, on October 20th, 2020, he decides to escalate his need for total control to an unbelievable extreme.
He decides the walls can't hold him.
He actually orchestrates an escape.
He did. It was brief, but it was highly dramatic. He used materials he gathered inside the prison workshop to manufacture a highly realistic dummy explosive belt.
A fake bomb.
A fake bomb. He also fashioned what police described as a pistol-like object. He used these fake weapons to take a female prison psychologist hostage in her office.
Terrifying for her.
He threatened to detonate the explosive belt, force his way past the prison security gates with his hostage, and managed to hijack a passing white van just outside the prison walls.
It's like something out of a bad action movie, but the terror for the people involved was completely real. A bystander witnessed the police intercept and surround the van.
They swarmed him.
Madsen jumps out of the driver's seat, throws away the fake gun, but because he is still wearing what looks exactly like a suicide vest, the responding police snipers have to maintain a hard standoff.
I can't just tackle him.
Right. They force him to sit on the grass against a fence, surrounded by sniper rifles, while a heavily armored bomb disposal robot slowly rolls up to inspect the vest.
And how far did he actually get?
He was recaptured just 500 meters from the prison doors. The entire escape lasted about 5 minutes.
But the fallout from that 5-minute escape, combined with the ongoing public outrage over his prison romances, was profound. It actually led to direct, structural legislative change in Denmark.
The law was changed because of him.
The government introduced a new bill that the press immediately dubbed the Madsen Law. It was designed specifically to stop this kind of psychological manipulation from behind bars.
What did the law actually do?
The law prevents inmates who are serving life sentences from initiating any new romantic relationships or correspondences for the first 10 years of their sentence. Their communication is legally restricted exclusively to people they already knew prior to their incarceration.
And of course, Peter Madsen, believing he is the ultimate exception to every rule, immediately sued the Danish Ministry of Justice.
Now,
He had the audacity to claim that the law violated his right to a private life under the European Convention on Human Rights. He ultimately lost that case in 2023, but the mere fact that he brought it shows his relentless, unwavering belief that societal rules simply shouldn't apply to him.
meanwhile, as Madsen was pulling these performative stunts and tying up the legal system, the community he left behind was grappling with an immense, lingering trauma.
The people who knew him.
Yes, the artistic community on Rough Charlene, the peninsula where he built his submarines, was absolutely devastated. These were unconventional creatives, builders, and artists who prided themselves on being an open, trusting community.
And he exploited that trust.
And suddenly, their home, their safe space, was globally associated with a sadistic, premeditated murder. One artist from the collective captured the emotional weight perfectly. They said, "It's like you have a small village, and the fool in the village did something that can never be forgiven."
That is a heartbreaking way to describe the loss of innocence in a community. And that trauma, that collateral damage, extended far beyond the harbor. It extended directly into how the media handled the story.
It became a huge debate.
This case became a massive ongoing flashpoint for the ethics of true crime media. How do we consume these stories? Who gets hurt when we turn tragedy into entertainment? When you look at the sources, you see two completely opposite approaches to telling this story.
Yeah, two totally different philosophies.
On one hand, you have Tobias Lindholm's television series, The Investigation, and Lindholm makes a radical ethical choice. He completely omits Madsen. They never show his face. They never cast an actor to play him. They never even say his name out loud in the entire series.
Which is powerful.
The focus is entirely, 100%, on the grueling police work, the marine forensics, and the quiet dignity of Kim Wall's parents.
It was a very deliberate choice to deny the killer the infamy he so desperately craved. But on the exact opposite end of the ethical spectrum, you have Emma Sullivan's documentary, Into the Deep.
Right.
Now, the context here is critical. Sullivan had actually been following Madsen and his young workshop interns for a full year before the murder took place. She was making a documentary about this quirky inventor.
So she had all this footage.
So when the murder happened, she suddenly possessed this incredible, raw, pre-murder footage that showed his micro-behaviors, his manipulation of his volunteers, the dark jokes he made just days before the crime.
From a purely narrative standpoint, it's a documentary filmmaker's holy grail, right?
Sure. But the release of that film caused a severe, very real ethical crisis. Because the people in that footage, these young interns, these volunteers who were just trying to learn engineering, they didn't sign up to be supporting characters in a global true crime documentary about a sadistic murderer.
They were just kids working on a project.
When the film premiered at the Sundance Film Festival, the backlash from the participants was immediate and intense. The cinematographer of the film actually stepped forward and publicly withdrew his support for his own movie.
Wow, really?
He stated that he had been officially diagnosed with acute stress disorder due to the events, and that the continued exploitation of the footage was re-traumatizing the innocent crew members. A key subject in the film also stated she was kept in the final cut completely against her will.
So it forced a massive change.
The controversy got so severe that Netflix, who had bought the rights, had to step in, delay the global release for months, and use advanced digital masking technology to disguise the faces and voices of the unwilling participants.
It is a profound debate. It forces the audience to ask, at what point does the pursuit of a compelling narrative, or even the pursuit of understanding a killer's psychology, infringe upon the basic psychological safety of the collateral victims?
The bystanders whose lives were hijacked by his actions.
Exactly. Which is why, after spending this time unpacking the dark architecture of Peter Madsen's mind and the forensic science used to trap him, I want to make sure we end this deep dive exactly where it should end, by bringing the focus squarely back to Kim Wall.
Because she is the reason we're talking today.
Her parents, Ingrid and Joachim, faced an unimaginable nightmare. But they absolutely refused to let their daughter's legacy be defined by the man who ended her life. They refused to let her be reduced to just a true crime victim.
They fought back.
They co-authored a beautiful memoir titled A Silenced Voice, The Life of Journalist Kim Wall.
And they took concrete action to ensure her work continued. They established the Kim Wall Memorial Fund in partnership with the International Women's Media Foundation.
Keeping her work alive.
They raised over $100,000, and that fund now provides annual, ongoing grants to female journalists who, just like him, want to go out into the world and cover the undercurrents of rebellion. Furthermore, Columbia University, her alma mater, established a permanent scholarship fund in her name for aspiring investigative journalism students.
They made sure through sheer force of will that when people say the name Kim Wall, her legacy is courage. It is
Yeah.
empathy. It is rigorous, fearless research. It is not victimhood.
She remains an inspiration.
So, to summarize the incredible breadth of what we've unpacked today, we have looked closely at how a combination of brilliant deep-sea marine mechanics, the astonishing biology of cadaver dogs detecting dissolved gases in the ocean, and a meticulous, undeniable timeline of digital footprints left a narcissistic, psychopathic killer completely trapped.
He thought he was smarter than everyone else.
But his elaborate, improvised lies were systematically dismantled by the irrefutable laws of physics, biology, and his own hard drive. Thank you so much for joining us on this intense exploration of evidence, technology, and psychology.
But before we let you go, if we connect the mechanics of this case to the broader picture of human behavior, I want to leave you with a psychological concept to mull over.
Let's hear it.
Consider the idea of environmental profiling. Think deeply about the UC-3 Nautilus. Peter Manson built that submarine entirely to his own singular specifications. Because it was amateur-built, he wasn't constrained by commercial regulations, standard safety protocols, or the input of a corporate engineering team.
It was purely him.
That submarine was a literal, physical, 33-ton steel manifestation of his own mind. It was cramped. It was isolated. It was highly pressurized, fundamentally disconnected from the outside world, and deeply inherently hazardous to anyone else who entered it.
That is a terrifying thought.
It raises a very unsettling question for you to explore on your own. How often do we step into physical spaces? People's homes, their vehicles, their private customized workshops. They're actually architectural extensions of their unseen psychological landscape.
That is profoundly disorienting. The spaces we build reflect the minds we possess. Always look closely at the architecture of the spaces you enter, and never ignore the undercurrents around you. Stay curious, stay safe. And always remember the vibrant, brilliant journalists who smile and wave goodbye from the towers, simply looking for the humanity in the world. We'll see you next time.